Welcome to Whiskey Wanderlust. We're here at Talnua Distillery in Arvada, and Patrick, the owner, is going to give us a cool tour of his awesome facility here. So Patrick, kick it off.
All right, cheers. Well, I was describing that this is not the normal place where you start. It's right in the middle where packaging, receiving, barrel intake, bottle storage, where we have on either side of us all of the distillation, mashing, fermentation, and then the rack house on the other side here. And
well,
here's
cool
our
thing
labels.
Is we can see their home done labels by their business partner and his cousin Amy.
Yes,
who does a fantastic job on their beautiful labels. Kind of cool to see those in the raw.
In the raw.
So this expression on the back of the label.
Bala.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it is our motto. It means clear the way. Originally, the Connacht Rangers used that motto as part of the Irish Armed Forces, and the Americans during the Civil War, known as the Irish Brigade, adopted Clear the Way because they were volunteers to go to battle. And so as America's first single pot still distillery, we thought part of the kind of heritage tie, clear the way. So Fahabala is that saying. Our Continuum cask here, we are outgrowing these, right? So originally when we were dumping those quarter casks in, this was the entire show. This is where we did all of our blending of all those casks that went into our Solera program. We then added a secondary vessel for harvesting. So now Continuum is 2 vessels where new barrels at 3 years old go into first cask, and then we bottle out of this vessel and then slowly add that in, right? So this is our flow, but when you look at the barrels that are currently going into this, we need a much larger one. So we're getting that this year that we're really excited about. That'll go over in our rack house.
Are you going to keep this somewhere where people can appreciate it?
We will. We'll find something fun to do with it. It's really great. And this vat is actually a cognac vat from France. And so they're really cool. We will definitely keep these two. They will not be relics.
A lot of character.
Very, very much. These are our cold water tanks that are hooked into our glycol system with our chillers outside. The way our chiller cools these tanks down, goes over to the stills, knocks that steam down into distillate, returns into our hot water tank, and then gets brewed and distilled with. And this is my office in here, and then we're gonna build a nice little lounge up in here.
What's all the hardware you got on the wall there?
So actually, this is cool. It's one of my favorite things. This is from a cooperage outside of Philadelphia that went out of business in the 1920s. And I bought it from a family estate sale for $500. A whole set of cooper's tools that all was at that distillery from one of the coopers. Nice Colorado weather.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when you talk about terroir, nice cool weather in the winter, nice hot weather in the summer. These are our 2 silos. One is for malted barley and one is for our raw unmalted barley. We fill these up. Each of these holds 60,000 pounds. We run these out typically about every 2.5 to 3 weeks. We're running new malt and new barley through these silos. Come on in. This is our RMS mill. We mill everything on site here, so all that barley that comes in, we need to turn into grist, right? And so that grist, actually, I have here our unmalted barley. You can see the unmalted barley, the kernels are a little bit smaller and very yellow. That malting process hydrates those. You get that swelling before it is kilned and dried. And then this is our Colorado malt, a little bit more plump and a little bit more brown than with the roasting on it. This is all pale 2-row is what we use. We have some other fun things with different malt roasts that'll come out here in the future. But all of our base product lines, all of our core product lines, we use Colorado 2-row malted barley. So much more like a brewer, not distiller's malt or 6-row malt. Really kind of that heritage grain.
And currently your recipes call for 50% of the malt and 50% of the unmalted, correct?
Exactly. Yep, that's our house recipe.
Right.
Yeah. So this is great because, you know, I mean, as a miller, like this is my people here. So this is just a really fantastic piece of equipment, very efficient. She can mill 5,000 pounds an hour. So really a workhorse.
For those of you who have not read the show notes yet, his last name is Miller.
That's right. Yeah, Patrick Miller. There you go. Yeah. All right, come on in. Yeah, but this is our butt, even on a snow day. I'm beginning another dram.
I'm still mucking mine. Yeah,
good?
yeah. That's a good shot.
All right, let's go back through here. All right, so now we are on the mashing side here and fermentation in what is known as the cellar. You can hear our fermentations ripping away. We'll get back to that here in a second. But all of that grain coming from the mill, that grist, comes up our flex auger, goes into our mash tun. So we have that rule, the barley rule, right? 50-50 malted and unmalted barley. And then we have the wort separation rule. So this mash tun has a false bottom. That false bottom allows that barley to sit on top of the mash floor so that the liquid can be passed and pumped into our boil kettle and all the grain stay in the mash tun. Bourbon, rye, wheat whiskeys, oftentimes everything is mashed in together. That entire mash goes into fermentation. That fermented mash goes into the stills. It's not a legal process in Ireland. You have to separate the wort like you do when you make beer. So that all of the sugar, wort is that German word for sweet barley tea that makes beer, gets transferred over into our boil kettle. And like I said, that barley can then sit here on top. We have our bin that we send over to either cattle feed or organic compost. And then we boil. And so one thing that you'll notice here that's different than what a lot of the Irish do, it's different than what a lot of American distillers do, is we boil our wort to sanitize it, to clean it, so that no other microbes are acting on that. Because you've made this sweet sugar water, every microbe wants a piece of that action, right? And so,
I mean, is it akin to pasteurizing?
It is, very much so. It's actually a step further. When you boil, you kill way more than you do when you pasteurize. This process for us takes about 8 hours. The raw, unmalted component, the enzymes in the malted barley need to have a lot more time to convert that raw barley from starch to sugar as well. It's also a different sugar profile than you get in the malting process. So you get a lot of heavy, long-chain dextrins, unfermentable sugars that lead to that oiliness that you get from the distillate that comes off.
Interesting.
Now, our fermenters, you'll see here, are jacketed and climate controlled. You can actually see we're knocking this one down. The reason that it is sweating, it's nice and cold. You can see it's 40 degrees in there currently. Feel that manway door. So that's nice cold beer, or what distillers call wash. So when we have cleaned this by boiling, we clean and sanitize the inside of these stainless steel tanks. So when we add our yeast, which is actually from the Guinness Brewery in Dublin, Irish ale yeast, that is the only microbe that is acting on that fermentation. So it is eating all that sugar, giving us those three elements. We control the heat with glycol. CO2 is coming out, you can see in these buckets that are full of sanitizer, works as an airlock. So air can come out as the yeast is respirating, but no bacteria can get back into the system. So it's a closed system. We then crash those tanks or knock those tanks down to 38 degrees. All that fat and happy yeast that's eating all the sugar in that tank flow down into the cone. And we have a yeast brink over here. Her name is Dimples. It's dimpled because it's a glycol jacket so that we can keep that yeast cold for the week, so that we pitch that in to each of our new
batches. So you keep reusing your yeast.
Yep,
your yeast is continuously growing.
4 to 5 generations.
So when people talk about like open air fermentation, like 291 does open air fermentation.
Yeah, totally.
They're taking ambient stuff into that. And You guys are not doing that here.
Not at all. There's nothing open to air here. Our fermentations, we control for flavor. We've built our flavor profile that we want our wash to taste like. And we can build a really consistent product that way too, so that by the time, the stills, and one thing I love about stills is for anybody who's trying to ever do this ever, the stills are like a calculator. It is garbage in, garbage out. It is not going to heal anything that you have done in fermentation. So if you make an excellent fermentation, you will get excellent distillate coming off of it. Each of these is 1,400 gallons.
Okay.
So it takes 2 brews. So 16 hours of brewing gives us 1,500 gallons of wash that is ready to go into our still.
I would like to point out too that you have beautiful, there's 3 stills here, copper pot stills with the American flag flanking. Is it intentional for your 3 stills here to potentially represent the 3 stripes of the Irish flag?
Actually, no, but I do love that. You're the first person to ever ask me that.
Right?
I feel like, no, actually, they are named after the Norns, or the 3 sisters that weave the fates of man in Norse and Proto-Celtic mythology. We have Earth, Verðandi, and Skuld, which translates into the past, the present, and the future. So that is their names: our wash still, our faint still, and our spirit still.
The heat level up here,
it changes significant. Oh, dude!
Holy smokes, dude! It's like, do you feel the temperature difference?
In the summer, it is hot up here. And we ran stills today. Our typical process, and one of the things about single pot still, as I mentioned, and anyone who's ever done a mash before, it doesn't take 8 hours to make almost any other kind of whiskey, because we need this step mash for converting unmalted barley into sugar.
Okay.
It takes a lot longer. We use a slower yeast. Most bourbon fermentations are 3 to 4 days. Ours is every bit of 7 days. We then triple distill instead of double distill, or use a column still. So we fill this thing up, run her for 8 hours, capture that liquid, next day, pump it into the next still, rinse and repeat. We do that 3 times, right? So the beauty of single pot still whiskey is in the inefficiency. All of this is much slower and lower, quieter than any other distillery and other type of whiskey that is made. And so it's really a special part of the heritage, because we're gonna do all of this. It takes us about 2 weeks to complete our full process here. And then it's gonna sit in that cask for 4 years. And so really spending the time here to build our processes, build the spirit that is going into the cask is really important.
Is there a particular reason why you chose to do 3 different stills versus running it through the same still?
When you have individual stills whose only job is to run these out, it makes a much cleaner spirit. And it's a great question that is answered here at the Spirit Safe.
Spirit Safe?
The Spirit Safe.
I need a Spirit Safe in my house.
It's fantastic.
Cool.
This Spirit Safe, covered in grain dust, was a Scottish invention necessitated by the taxman, so that at any Scottish distillery, you were not able to pilfer off any new make unless the revenuer or taxman was there and the master distiller.
So one lock for the taxman who had the key.
Yep.
And then the
one
local
lock
key
for the master distiller.
Interesting.
Yep. And so this has a heritage to
it's a bit like
Ireland
the button
and Scotland
in Washington D.C. This is.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, 100%.
Right?
This is the 2 keys at the same time. Yeah, totally. Each of these stills, we can control at the Spirit Safe which tank it goes into through our valving series here. So I could run all 3 stills into one tank, 2 stills into one into another, all 3 into 3 different tanks. But you can see through the triple distillation here, this oily texture. I mean, literally stick your finger in there and feel that oiliness.
Oh yeah.
It's wild.
Smells like a penny.
It does. Yeah, totally. Well, it's great. It's copper. Right?
Yeah.
So
I'm noticing that this is patina.
Yeah. So this is giving you, when people ask like, why do you use copper, right? Copper reacts with the sulfur in any distillation, pulls that sulfur out into copper sulfate, and that smells like rotten eggs. Especially when it's in concentration. Yeah, it is not nice. So you don't want any of this in your distillate, right? Yeah. So you can see here that each distillation stripping out all those heavy oils from the washroom, right? Stripping out all of that copper from the faint still, and then look how clean the distillation is coming off of the spirit still.
So are you using this then to do your heads, hearts, and tails into?
Exactly. Okay. Yep. So this is what does our heads, hearts, and tails, because we only make cuts on the final spirit run.
I mean, this does not look like a very complicated chemistry set.
It's not, no. This is old tech, right? Very old tech.
I mean, you mentioned that, but I mean, your background, right, would suggest, and your strength of the early processes, right, suggests you're very scientific on that.
Yeah.
But this does not appear to be very scientific. So how do you do? I mean, how do you rely on your nose to really get and maintain a quality spirit?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about small batch, is that it's not necessarily wildly consistent, but there are also windows of this, right? This doesn't happen in like 10 seconds, right? I mean, this is a period of time, 10, 20 minutes of cuts where you're allowing it to go in, As soon as you start to get that indication that things are turning, that you don't want to capture that anymore, at least in what's going into the cask,
right,
that's when you'll make that cut. We'll run the rest of that out, it'll get redistilled. And if you are not paying attention on a tails cut, you can ruin it, right? I mean, time is your only hope, right? And barrels aren't Band-Aids. Yeah, I mean, barrels aren't Band-Aids. That's like they can't solve every problem, but if you ran way too many tails in, your only hope is that those would get worked out over time.
But the most interesting thing about that is, like, you're using old tech with new tech, but really the most reliable tech that you've told me is even the oldest tech, which is your nose. Mm-hmm. Most reliable tech in this whole industry is right here.
It absolutely is, yeah. But when you start talking about how different barrels are, that amount of inconsistency is really trumped by how different casks. Part of the beauty of the whiskey industry, even with ex-bourbon barrels, with sherry barrels that are made out of American oak, is that American oak is a coveted species. It makes the best products in the world. It's just a perfect creature, and it's beautiful because it has what are known as whiskey ketones, which are basically just the flavor profiles that you want in whiskey. Caramels and vanillas and green apples, and it's just like everything is built in there. And I love that with whiskey. It is mankind's greatest agricultural achievement, in my opinion. It harnesses grains, yeast, water, oak, and brings all of that together into a perfect specimen that we all get to share. And it's just such an amazing thing that all of that works together in such beautiful harmony to bring it to people's glass. And I agree. I think it's really special. But we have ex-bourbon barrels, new virgin American white oak, Calvados barrels, Madeira casks, cognac casks, port casks. We've got all kinds of stuff over here, and just like over in the other building over in the rack house, all kinds of different cooperages that'll become different products, different product lines, different finishes. So for sure, it's fun, it's special. All right, boys. Well, what do we do to wrap up? What's your normal sign off?
I hear, man.
Just one of these.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you guys for having us.
Absolutely. This is really special.
Guys, if you guys have a chance to come down, tour their facility, come down and do it. They're great hosts, and they have some fantastic spirits, so come down and do it.
Cheers.
Cheers.